Ever notice how every country is swimming in debt? The US owes a staggering minus 14 trillion. Japan, almost $9 trillion. Even countries you'd think are loaded like oil-rich Saudi Arabia or export kings like Germany and China all owe massive amounts. It's a huge paradox, right? If everybody owes money, who exactly is everyone paying back? This is where things get interesting. Debt isn't just a burden. It's basically the operating system for our whole world. Every war, every crisis, every boom and bust, it's all sitting on this invisible scaffold of IOUs. And if you follow the money trail long enough, you find something kind of wild. The world doesn't really owe money to some secret person in a volcano lair. It owes it to itself. But that doesn't mean everyone wins equally. To figure out how we ended up on a planet drowning in over $315 trillion of debt, that's nearly 3 times the entire global economy, we have to go back, way back. Centuries before your credit card, the whole idea of national debt was born, not on Wall Street, but on the battlefield. In 1694, England was broke from fighting France. The king was out of gold. So he went to a bunch of rich merchants for help. He made a deal. Loan me money now, and in exchange I'll give you a permanent stream of interest payments guaranteed by future taxes. To manage this new setup, the Bank of England was born. This was a total game changer. The government could suddenly spend money it didn't even have, and the lenders got something priceless, a promise from the government. A promise you could trade, buy, or sell. That was the birth of the government bond, the tiny seed that grew into our entire modern financial system. France copied it. The Netherlands tweaked it. The brand new United States used it to fund its revolution. National debt was no longer a sign of failure. It was a sign of credibility. The power to borrow was the power to rule. Flash forward 300 years and debt is now the world's #1 export. The U.S. owes $38 trillion. Global borrowing goes up by $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country owes, every bank lends, and every single one of us, through our taxes, our savings, our pensions, is both a debtor and a creditor. So, who's really holding the other end of the rope? Let's start with the U.S., because its debt is a global issue. Out of that $38 trillion, about half is publicly held, money owed to investors. About 2/3 of those investors are American. We're talking U.S. banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve itself. The other 1/3, about -1 trillion, followed by China, $800 billion, then the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So, when people say the U.S. is in debt to China, it's true. But China only holds about 2% of the total debt. The reality is, most of the debt America owes is to America. The Treasury issues bonds. U.S. banks and funds buy them. The Fed often buys them back, creating new dollars to do it. Americans pay taxes, which fund the interest on those bonds, which then flows right back into American retirement accounts. It's a giant circular mirror. The debt is real, but the creditor is mostly just a reflection of the same system. And this circle isn't just an American thing, it's global. Japan lends to the U.S. The U.S. lends to Europe via the IMF. Europe lends to developing nations via the World Bank. And those developing nations lend right back to the U.S. and Europe by parking their cash in safe Western bonds. It's a planetary game of hot potato, but the potato is made of promises. But there's another layer, the most powerful one of all, the markets themselves. Behind every bond is a web of massive institutions, hedge funds, pension funds, and central banks that control trillions of dollars. These guys are the real shot callers. They decide which nations get to borrow cheaply and which ones will pay a fortune just to survive. When they lose confidence, currencies crash and governments fall. Democracy decides who gets to govern. The markets decide who gets to survive. And the ultimate boss of this whole system? The central bank, like the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank. Central banks don't just manage debt, they manufacture it. Every time the Fed buys a government bond, it essentially creates new money in exchange. The debt of one part of the government becomes the asset of another. Here's a mind-bender. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Every single dollar, every coin, every digital balance in your account represents an IOU somewhere else. For decades, this whole loop has kept going purely on confidence. As long as investors believe governments will pay the interest, even if they never pay back the principal, the machine keeps humming. But what happens when that confidence breaks? We saw it in Greece in 2010. The debt became unpayable. Bondholders panicked. The rescue that came from the EU and IMF meant austerity, brutal tax hikes, spending cuts, and mass unemployment. We've seen it in Argentina, where constant defaults turned debt into a national curse. In Sri Lanka, where the government ran out of foreign money to pay its loans, leading to fuel shortages and political collapse. When the system breaks, the anonymous creditors suddenly have a face. The IMF, the rating agencies, the bondholders who hold entire nations by the throat. And yet, even after a total meltdown, the same logic just restarts. New loans replace old ones. The machine just resets. Here's why. This is the real secret. In the 21st century, government debt isn't designed to be repaid. It's designed to be rolled over. That's not a conspiracy, it's just policy. When you or I take out a loan, we're expected to pay back the whole thing. Governments don't. They treat debt like a permanent subscription. They just issue new bonds to pay off the old ones. Economists call it refinancing. The global economy now runs on this. The system runs on confidence, not repayment. The United States will never clear its $38 trillion debt. It will refinance it forever. Japan has been doing this for decades, and its debt is over 250% of its economy. Yet its borrowing costs are near zero. Why? Because for investors, government debt, especially U.S. debt, is the safest collateral in existence. A U.S. Treasury bond isn't seen as a liability, it's an asset. It's the foundation of global markets. Pension funds need it. Banks use it as security. Central banks treat it like cash. The system depends on governments never paying off their debt. Think about it. What if Washington actually did pay off all $38 trillion? Banks and funds worldwide would lose their most stable asset. The world's money supply would shrink, triggering a massive collapse. Paying off the debt would destroy the very system it holds up. So, governments do the opposite. They keep issuing more. The debt has become the heartbeat of capitalism itself, pulsing through every pension, mortgage, and market on Earth. That's why when politicians talk about balancing the budget or paying down the national debt, they're selling an illusion. The goal isn't to eliminate debt. It's to keep it sustainable and desirable enough that the system never stops believing in it. Because once that belief fades, the numbers don't matter. Confidence dies, interest rates spike, and the whole house of cards comes tumbling down. The plan was never to pay it back. The plan is to keep the world believing it will. But there's one last catch. When we say we owe it to ourselves, that's only half true. Those interest payments don't flow equally to everyone. They flow upward, from regular taxpayers and workers to the institutions and wealthy investors who own the debt. Debt isn't just a transfer between countries. It's a transfer between classes. That's why global inequality and global debt rise together, hand in hand. The system rewards those who own the debt and punishes those who merely pay for it. At the top of this pyramid, there isn't one person to blame. It's not China. It's not Wall Street. It's not the IMF. It's all of them. And it's us. Our modern system has turned debt itself into money. Governments issue it, banks multiply it, investors trade it, and we all depend on it. The line between debtor and creditor is gone. Debt used to mean bondage. Today, it means balance. But if that balance ever tips, If that confidence ever breaks, we'll all remember what debt really is. A promise that can't be kept forever. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.